Here we go. This article first appeared on my Substack, so I highly recommend you go check it out over there. I apologize for the lighting and just like the general atmosphere in here right now. I am in Spain, just got here for study abroad, going to be here for the next 4 months, and so the lighting is certainly not what it could be, but I'm going to work on that for the next few videos. We'll get into that. But anyway, let's jump right into this article. So this is called The Lost Heroic Archetype of It's a Wonderful Life. Some thoughts on George Bailey with a little bit of Cicero. Excellent. You got to love that. What a thumbnail right here. I mean, oh my goodness. I actually haven't even watched all of these movies to the right. This one with Florence Pugh, I think it's We Live in Time. I was at a dinner with a buddy of mine and his sister, and they got in a huge argument about the movie because my friend was kind of arguing more what I argue in this essay, that the George Bailey type of hero, the hero of duty is better than the person who's just trying to self-actualize their dream. Again, I haven't watched the movie, but I'm pretty sure she kind of bails out on her husband or a wedding or something just to pursue her cooking dreams, and we're supposed to celebrate that. And then obviously we've got Whiplash and movies like that, La La Land, so on and so forth. Okay, let's get it out of the way. It's a Wonderful Life is incredible. I can only think of two possible reasons why someone would not enjoy this movie. Either one, their soul has been so thoroughly stuffed with unesthetic, dull, and obscene modern visions of heroism that they lack either the capacity or honesty to receive the beauty of this film. Or they are neoconservative, interested more in GDP than love, even in their entertainment. I say this only because Ben Shapiro recently defended Potter, who's the film's villain. That's a really good clip. I might even insert it into this video.
Now, also, Lionel Barrymore is correct. So on a financial level, the villain of this piece is actually the hero, because if Jimmy Stewart actually gets his way, all of Bedford Falls collapses in the subprime mortgage crisis. Basically, Jimmy Stewart keeps giving out loans without proper checking into the credit history of the people he's giving loans to based on his sort of assessment of their own personal viability financially. Lionel Barrymore is much more by the numbers. Lionel Barrymore is a better banker, and that local bank probably goes under. So the movie was supposed to be sort of a quasi-socialistic FDR parable, but the reality is that the real estate policies followed by Jimmy Stewart bankrupt Bedford Falls, and everybody ends up homeless.
But to most who suffer from neither of these afflictions, it is either that it is clear that It's a Wonderful Life is a great candidate for what we could reductively call a perfect film. I 100% agree. Low-key a perfect film. Yet the film's hero, George Bailey, displays none of the common traits shared by most heroes in modern film. He is not eccentric. He is not self-interested. He doesn't want freedom at the cost of community. Self-actualization is not his highest goal. His bodily finitude is not a moral justification. His connections are inherited, not chosen. His work is service, not his identity. He sacrifices himself for others, not some of his opportunities for better ones. So, my question is this. Is it possible that the antiquated form of heroism portrayed by Bailey is precisely why so many people resonate with this film on such a deep level? And if so, what can this tell us about what modern heroism might be lacking? And yeah, I mean, you watch It's a Wonderful Life, and I watched it for the first time this Christmas with my family. I was in tears the entire time. I was very touched by it. But you watch it, and if you're used to the modern heroes that Hollywood feeds us on a regular basis these days, you won't find any of that there. You'll find all of these things, I should say. A personal favorite is bodily finitude as moral justification. I think there's a lot of this, you only live once, go do whatever you want to do. And while I do think that there's some truth to that, you do only live once, you should go and pursue what you're interested in. Still not a moral justification, but oftentimes I find that Hollywood, uses it that way. You only live once, so might as well, walk out on your baby mama to go pursue your dreams. But anyway, let's continue. Heroism as duty. As a framework for understanding this divide between the Hays Code era hero George Bailey and the many new Hollywood heroes of today, I would like to present a duality, that of heroism as duty and heroism as self-actualization. Heroism as duty. This is the kind of heroism represented best by George Bailey, and though the list of heroes like him is short, we also see it in the likes of Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird and Samwise Gamgee in The Lord of the Rings. Bang, we got the boy himself right there. Characters that display heroism as duty belong to a necessarily short list because they require three elements that modern storytelling resists glorifying. That one, obligation precedes choice. This is seen most clearly when George postpones his world tour and instead takes over his father's bank when he dies. But is exhibited time and time again by George throughout the film. 2, that staying can be heroic. Whether it is George staying his entire life in Bedford Falls or how Sam, while traveling far, never changes his moral character. 3, that the value of life is found in that which does not collapse. It is true that nothing spectacular happens to George throughout the movie, but perhaps what is spectacular are all the things that do not happen, that would have were it not for his moral fortitude. Bedford Falls does not become Pottersville, like we see at the end of the movie. And the housing market stays afloat, and small businesses are not all eaten up. So those are our 3 kind of, staples of heroism as duty that you see in the likes of George Bailey and Samwise and so on and so forth. What all 3 of these requirements have in common is their emphasis on duty, a word hardly used today without a level of ironic tonality involved, or maybe, in like a military sense, you could say too. Yet I believe it is precisely this sense of duty that makes characters like George and Sam so endearing to us. In a society that tells us we can be whatever we want to be and that we ought to pursue our own authentic vision no matter the costs, the idea that our greatest fulfillment might be found within unchosen restraints seems utterly foreign and yet refreshing. But don't just take my word for it. Here, let us turn to the famous Roman statesman and orator Marcus Tullius Cicero. Bang, the boy himself. And yeah, I guess a quick word on this. I don't think there is anything inherently wrong with choosing an authentic vision for your life. But like I've said in past articles, even getting to that idea of an authentic vision is actually a lot more fraught and difficult than you might think. You're dealing with mimetic influences. You're dealing with the fact that there is no I separate from the world that you are a part of. And so for you to think that you've got some inner layer to yourself that you just have to discover and pursue, it's a bit of a misnomer, and it's not really true. And so, well, yes, I would advise people to spend the time they have on this planet in a way that they, deem satisfying. It's not something that, one, you should necessarily be, sacrificing everything in your life for. And 2, it doesn't mean that you can't get a lot of meaning out of your duties. I mean, he's obviously fallen off these days, but one thing I think Jordan Peterson actually did get right was the idea that we get the most meaning in life out of responsibility. So, yeah, but let's continue. In his book On Duties, Cicero insists that the common good must always be put before private or selfish goods. He arrives at this conclusion after examining human nature and concluding that as a social and rational being, man's self-interest is always the same as the interests of the whole. If we map Cicero's views back onto our 3 requirements above, we see that it maps on perfectly. For Cicero, the idea that obligations precede choice was obvious. He saw clearly the embeddedness of human fellowship, that from the moment we are born, how we are always someone, not just a malleable something. There is no self to make choices from, separate from the role and, crucially, the responsibilities we are born into. But these responsibilities are not a constraint to Cicero. They are the very foundations of moral freedom. When we are responsible to one another, we are given the opportunity to exercise virtue and judgment, as it is rightly said that we cannot act justly in a vacuum. I mean, this is so true. We think about the virtue of justice. It is always, and I think I said this in my last video, justice is always a social virtue. It's always political. It's always in relation to other people. You can't just, there's no just person who's living by themselves in the forest. You know what I mean? You have to be, it's always going to be political. It always concerns the whole. And so, yeah, it can't be done in a vacuum. The parent faces genuine moral dilemmas in raising a child. The true friend learns the meaning and value of loyalty, and the judge seeks both mercy and justice. If we contrast this mindset with the modern hero who seeks to unshackle themselves from all responsibilities that don't directly benefit them, we can see the sharp difference in ideals. But more on that soon. I mean, yeah, and I go to this later in the article, but I think Whiplash is the crucial example, and it's almost comedic, right? There's the scene where he breaks up with his girlfriend because he wants to be one of the greats, right? And, you're just thinking, I mean, this dude is sacrificing everything. Or like, I don't know how many of you guys would be familiar with this guy if you're watching this type of content, but like Alex Hormozy, who's in like the kind of like online entrepreneurship space. I like a lot of his stuff, but he really emphasizes pain and suffering. And while these are definitely necessary contingent parts of life, he really glorifies it in this kind of strange way. uh, I find, where it's like, yeah, no, I sacrificed everything. You know what I mean? I cut off my father. And maybe in his case, like these things were necessary, right, for him to grow, and pursue that vision that he had for himself. But, he doesn't have kids. And, he didn't, as far as I can tell, he didn't have super strong bonds with family. I think he's an immigrant or something like that. So that might be part of it. But like, it's this idea that you're going to find the most meaning in your own kind of solitary mission, that you see reflected not just in Hollywood, but in guys like him. And they're spreading their message, Hollywood's spreading their messages. And I think a lot of people think, oh, no, I just got to sacrifice everything around me for myself, when perhaps you might have to sacrifice yourself for others. But let's continue. It would also be clear to Cicero that George staying in Bedford Falls was the most heroic thing to do. George was genuinely needed in Bedford Falls, and though he might have dreamed of being a great architect, it was his more meager role that ended up having the larger impact. Cicero saw our stations in life not as prisons, but as arenas of excellence. Yet to many of us today, we see our stations in life in just the opposite way. We feel trapped by our circumstances, and for some of us, we may really need to transcend our station. But for most of us, Cicero would say that we, just like George, fail to see the moral weight and significance of our roles. And of course we do. As I said in my last essay, that which a society praises becomes that which people aspire towards. So it's no wonder we feel trapped by our circumstances when our society only venerates those who have transcended theirs. But what Cicero shows us is that the significance of a life has nothing to do with what a person does for themselves, only what they do for others and for the stability of society at large. This is an interesting idea, and you kind of have to come to your own opinions on it. Like, I myself, while watching It's a Wonderful Life, found myself torn. I want to do a lot of, great things with my life too. I see this channel itself a uh, as a very small but hopefully growing, means of self-actualization in a sense, and being able to spread my writing, which is what I'm really passionate about. And perhaps, that's good because it's impacting others, right? And I want to travel the world too, right? Just like George. Your heart kind of breaks when George has all these big dreams, and he's not able to go and actualize them, and is forced by circumstance into this role that he wouldn't have chosen. And yet you can't help but watch It's a Wonderful Life and just go, wow, this dude is so much more admirable. I look up to this guy 10 times more because he stayed in Bedford Falls and didn't go and do, a cruise down the Nile, or whatever he was planning to do, right? He wanted to go see the exotic places of the world, if we're using like 50s lingo or whatever. It was filmed. So, yeah. But anyway, let's see. All right. So this leads well into the final requirement of heroism of duty, that the value of a life is found in that which does not collapse. For Cicero, the highest political achievement was not revolution or transformation, but preservation. It was the ability to keep society functioning and preserving the institutions, communities, and customs that yield human flourishing. And while a healthy conversation can certainly be had about the kinds of institutions that lead to such flourishing, Cicero would be appalled by any suggestion that the greatest action was that which altered the status quo. Okay, I want to share something a little personal here. I'm from the more or less great state of Vermont. I mean, I really do think Vermont is a tremendous state in many ways. Small state, not many people know what we even get up to, but we have a ton of like Grateful Dead fans, and we have a ton of ex-hippies in Vermont, and we have a ton of very activisty type folk, who are always trying to smash this system or uproot this. I saw a good quote today. And it was something to the effect of the 60s were not a revolution. They were a tantrum. And I think Cicero would agree with that. And again, that's not to say every old system is perfect, but I think we have to take a degree of caution and have a degree of reverence for and respect for the systems that have been in place for a long time, because they've been able to endure more than just, these fleeting little things that come and go, right? So Cicero would see the 60s as a tantrum, you know what I mean? And what I think is so great about It's a Wonderful Life is that, George is really standing by those systems and those institutions. He's got the build and loan. He's got the build and loan. And he's, it's not going well. He's not, like Ben Shapiro says in his video, he's not actually a good banker, But that doesn't matter because he's standing for something so much greater. He's trying to help his community. But anyway, and yeah, I mean, I definitely think, like, again, like a healthy conversation should be had about like what are the institutions that lead to human flourishing. There's a bunch of conflicting ideas about what constitutes the good life, right? But I think it's clear that institutions that prioritize the family and that prioritize building of community, civic engagement, things that lead to a healthy society like that are pretty obvious. I think, you know, any society that's positing like ours does, that the greatest society is one where people just pursue their own individual goods. It's kind of a fantasy of liberalism. I think it's obvious that over time, like we're seeing more and more, as Patrick Deneen points out in Why Liberalism Failed, we are really kind of just in this entropic phase. It's just increasing randomness with every individual in our society. But anyway, let's continue. To us, such sentiments sound absurd. How can we seek anything but altering the status quo? How could we not worship at the altar of progress? How could the future be anything but better than the present? How could I not want to break free from the circumstances of my birth? Is new not always better? Yet is that not the exact philosophy of the film's villain Potter? Potter embodies pure autonomy, pure self-interest, pure transcendence of obligation. He owes nothing to Bedford Falls except what contracts require. He recognizes no duty except to his own advancement. He is always in pursuit of new projects and new deals, and in the modern sense, maximally free. George, on the other hand, exemplifies the polar opposite of all these qualities, and yet we root for him. Unlike Potter, he accomplishes very little over the course of the film, and by the end, he is barely hanging on. This is because what George is fighting to preserve, you can't feel until it's gone. You don't realize the value of strong community, civic engagement, constitutional order, Republican virtue, and spirited debate until it's gone. This is really the core of Ciceronian teaching, that it is much easier to destroy good things than build them, and as such, they must be defended. And honestly, by the way, that's that right there, that real little snippet. It's not just Cicero. I actually think that is the essence of conservatism in general. I mean, I think modern conservatism really gets mixed in with neoconservatism, the MAGA movement. Like, a lot of people think all of these things are synonymous, but if you want to like really strip it down, I think conservatism, think about conserving things, it really is just this idea that, the systems that we have today are, I believe this is G.K. Chesterton, they are the democracy of the dead, right? We keep these traditions going. Maybe they don't make sense to us, but they made sense to our forefathers and their forefathers. And so we keep them going, right? And it would be a whole lot easier to destroy these traditions than create new ones that are lasting and impactful, right? So that's really the essence of conservatism in a sense. I'm not trying to conservative pill people on this. And then also right here, this questioning: how can we not worship at the altar of progress? How could the future not be anything better than how could the future not be better than the present? Breaking free of the circumstances of my birth, transgenderism, sound familiar? Not just transgenderism, I would say this is kind of the credo of transhumanism in a sense, really. Like, what's going on here, and that's not to say technology is bad. I'm not necessarily a Luddite of any kind, but I do think we should, kind of think about the fact that the new is not always going to be better. Anyway, this is what George represents. This is what Sam represents. And when Cicero was executed by Mark Antony at the end of the Roman Republic, it is what he represented too. And yeah, let's remember that, like, Cicero literally sacrificed himself, to the bitter end, right? Was literally executed by the state. So this is we're learning this stuff from a real one. On Duties was lived out. All right, now we're gonna move into heroism as self-actualization. Now that we've covered heroism as duty, let us turn to the far more prevalent modern form of heroism as self-actualization. We see this style of heroism virtually everywhere nowadays, whether it be Whiplash, La La Land, Eat, Pray, Love, We Live in Time, or most recently Marty Supreme, though the list goes on. And by the way, this is not to say that these films are bad, quite far from it, but their heroes share nothing in common with George Bailey. And yeah, I mean, like, Whiplash is low-key one of my favorite movies. It's hilarious, it's well made, but Andrew is no George Bailey. If heroism as duty is defined by three requirements, then heroism as self-actualization rests on three inverse pillars. One, the choice precedes obligation. We've just flipped it around. The hero must shed all vestiges of their past life, and they owe nothing to that which they have not personally endorsed. Leaving is better than staying. Whether physically or mentally, the hero must detach from their surroundings in order to find and pursue their authentic vision. And 3, that the value of life is in what you build for yourself, not what you preserve for others. The hero's success is measured by personal achievements, artistic endeavors, or personal transformation. Where George Bailey asks, what does Bedford Falls need? The modern hero asks, what do I want? Let's take Andrew from Whiplash as a case study. Just like George, he sacrifices enormously. But where George sacrifices himself for others, Andrew sacrifices others for himself. In fact, he sacrifices just about everything he has to become one of the greats. To Andrew, everything is expendable. And to George, only he is expendable. Right there, if you want to take anything away from this video, take that line. The modern hero has everything is expendable. And to, these older heroes that we really look up to so much, they are the only person that's expendable. No one else is, no one else is expendable in that. The film vindicates his choice too, and we are left cheering for him despite the wreckage he's left behind. And I must say, like, as I'm thinking about this and looking at this, I'm able to like map on so many different political ideologies to this. I really do think the main difference is that heroism as self-actualization really just maps super hard onto liberalism, and that heroism as duty really maps super hard onto conservatism, like I was saying. Like, which side do you think of those two types of heroism is going to support abortion, for example? Let's not, we're not going to have a moral argument right now, but I think it's obvious that heroism as self-actualization is going to be a lot more comfortable sacrificing someone else for, their desire. It's what I say right here. To Andrew, everything is expendable, and to other modern heroes too. So, I mean, like, character gets pregnant, that hero, if they want to self-actualize, it's probably going to abort the baby, right? Whereas we can't imagine a George Bailey-like female protagonist doing that. And so I think these things map really harshly onto political realities too, which is worth thinking about. But anyway, the film never asks who is saved by Andrew's greatness, what has he preserved, or what would collapse had he not gotten his drum solo? Because these are not questions important to heroism as self-actualization. All that matters is the personal greatness and catharsis of the protagonist with little thought given to the rest of the world. And listen, I can empathize with this kind of heroism plenty. In fact, I love it. There is something incredible and inspiring and vindicating about watching someone rise from a lowly station to the heights of greatness. The thumos, the energia, and the vitality is what legends are made of. And all of us feel these stories at a deep level. I mean, yeah, let's be so real. We see Rocky go up the stairs, we're getting pumped. We love that shit. You know what I mean? I love it. You love it. We all love it. Hell, I see an edit on Instagram of some dude waking up early and getting after it. I get a little motivation myself. I really do enjoy that stuff. I think we all do. There's something super inspiring about it. And watching George Bailey just get beat down, nothing that inspiring, except it's kind of like this slower build where you're just kind of amazed by the fortitude of this man. It's a very different type of, not even motivation, just like awe and respect. And you really feel the heroism there. It's obvious, it's obvious that self-actualization matters and that accepting circumstances blindly is not virtuous. Yet the question remains whether self-actualization can be said to be the highest form of heroism and human activity. Here we arrive at the crucial insight, in my opinion. And that insight is that Andrew's heroism, or we might say heroism as self-actualization, relies entirely on George Bailey's heroism, which is to say, heroism. Let me explain. While Andrew's heroism in his pursuit of drum and greatness may certainly inspire us and spur us into action, it lacks the ability to maintain its own highest end. No amount of drumming is going to allow Andrew to create the societal conditions wherein drumming is a possible career. Only people like George, who self-sacrifice in virtue, establish the very ground on which all of Andrew's aspirations lie, can be said to be practicing the highest form of heroism. Again, this isn't to say there aren't lessons to be learned from films like Whiplash or the many others in its genre, but they will never fill us with the same depth of emotions as films like It's a Wonderful Life, where we see the very foundations of civilizations being fought for. This is why the greatest stories ever told always rest on the backs of personal sacrifice, whether it be the death of Jesus on the cross, Frodo carrying the ring to Mount Doom, or Atticus Finch defending Tom Robinson. These narratives endure because they touch something deeper than personal triumph. They show us what it means to bear the weight of the world so that others might flourish. And this is precisely what modern heroism has lost. The recognition that true greatness isn't found in transcending your obligations, but in shouldering them so completely that others are free to dream. George never gets his adventure, but Harry becomes a war hero. George never builds skyscrapers, but an entire town builds their lives in safety and dignity. The heroism as self-actualization asks, what can I become? The heroism as duty asks, what will collapse if I leave? While both questions matter, only one of them builds worlds worth living in. So there it is. I mean, that's more or less my article. And this was a lot of fun to write. I kind of just poured it out. I'd been brewing on it for a while, and we just cooked it up. But I think this is the crucial point, and I think when we really get down to it, even though it's somewhat hard to put a finger on it. I've laid out a nice dichotomy here. But why is one necessarily better than the other? I think you see it right here. You see that, wait, all of these stories of people becoming the world champion fighter like Rocky, becoming a great drummer, becoming a cook like We Live in Time. All of their dreams can only exist because there's a society that is stable enough for them to have dreams like that in the first place. You know what I mean? And so a little afterthought here that I cooked up. I'm aware that my argument for heroism as duty here somewhat resembles the argument that the statesman's life is greater than the life of the philosopher. And while the life of the philosopher might be said to be more self-sufficient, relying only on his own thoughts and having its end be the activity itself, I still maintain that one cannot philosophize while hunting or in the midst of battle. And as such, I still consider the life of the statesman and tangentially the life of an honest banker like George Bailey to be superior. For those of you that don't know what I'm talking about there, like we've been talking about heroism. Why are we talking about statesmen versus philosophers? This debate actually goes really far back to like the Nicomachean Ethics by Aristotle, where he's trying to lay out in Book 10 that the philosophic life is the highest life because it's the most self-sufficient, and that philosophy is something that is good within itself, whereas the art of statesmanship actually has an end, which is producing a just state, right? And I found myself disagreeing with Aristotle a lot when I was reading that, because I felt as though the conditions for the philosopher need to be laid by the statesman, because you can't philosophize in a hunter and gatherer tribe when you're on the hunt, or you're fighting other tribes, or you're in war. You need peace, you need stability to philosophize well. And so you have to give some credit to the statesman. Though to be fair to Aristotle, he does say that philosophy is a large part of crafting just laws too. And so they're actually it turns into a bit of a spiral and a paradox. And at the end of the day, you kind of just have to choose one. And maybe you can't have one without the other. But what I will say is that that's not the case for heroism, and that definitively heroism as duty is better than heroism as self-actualization, even though it's not always necessarily as entertaining. Anyway, this has been my article. It, again, originally first appeared on my Substack, Moran, right here. You can find it. Go shoot me a sub. That's where I put most of my effort into. These YouTube videos I kind of just cook up, put out there just to get a little more traffic. But, beyond that, like all my good stuff is on Substack. So go check it out there. But anyway, thanks for watching, and see you again soon.